So we are today at the National Campus, few days after the 40th anniversary of the release of the Macintosh. On this occasion, I watched on YouTube some very interesting video about former executive at Apple, and I learned a new story I didn't know yet about the Monday afternoon with Steve Jobs. Anyone have heard that? The way Steve Jobs review any apps, only by design, only by mock-ups, Photoshop, screens. Every apps before the release, before going even to development, was reviewed only from the UI and UX point of view. So as a FileMaker developer, this approach makes sense for me because what a user sees is only the layout, the surface of solutions. So everything is related, for user, everything is related only to the layout, not to the FileMaker engine. So it's necessary to make this layout the main focus when we develop a solution. So we're gonna see today how easy it could be to start the journey in layout design. So my name is Yann Liqueur-Salzedo. I make a long flight from France to be here tonight. Very happy after the pandemic times to see you face to face. It's not my first rodeo, as you say here. I did some DEF CON. My last one as a speaker was Las Vegas a few years ago. I don't know if one of you was there. I did maybe 10 years of French and European conference, and always a pleasure to be here. So I spoke in my introduction about the beginning of the Macintosh in 1984. It was the first computer delivered to a general audience, a UI, a graphic user interface. I had the chance to use this computer quite early when I was a student. You can figure how old I am. And the Macintosh learned me how to use desktop publishing and how to enjoy typography. This is what I'm using, what I'm still using in my layout, in my design layout. It was desktop publishing principles and typography and color and icons. Everything I learned 40 years ago. So to begin this session, I will present you some example of my past work and my recent work. Everything I will show you existing real life solution, not mock-ups. The goal is to show you that we are not limited only on startup solutions or existing themes, right? So maybe you have seen some of them on the past year on DEF CON. This was an iPad solution for a business jet maintenance company I made 10 years ago. It was made on the very beginning of the iPad and the first version of FileMaker Go. This is a second screen about a real estate management solution for desktop working on Mac and Windows. This one is a very complex project management solution in the events business. It's essentially a FileMaker solution, but you can see a calendar in the middle. It's a JavaScript library into a web viewer. Another one, an iPad application for sales team for the pharmaceutical industry. This is also a FileMaker solution with some JavaScript inside, a Google Map, a web viewer, and charts into a web viewer too. A production and invoicing management application in the printing business. You can already see the use I make of colors in all of my solutions. I had a client back in France who owned several retail stores, and at the time he wanted to track every invoices at the same time and with his iPhone. So this is an iPhone FileMaker Go app connected to a FileMaker server, which collects real-time data each time an invoice triggers the data. The entire UI is made of FileMaker layouts, of course. The chart on the right is a JavaScript library also into a web viewer. And the trick is I use a lot of tab panel to navigate. This is an iPad management app for another pharmaceutical company. For the same app, this is an iPhone module with FileMaker Go for expenses management. I try to reproduce what you can have with the banking app. My much recent work in my new company, Key System, we're a company based in Monaco. We're building a vertical solution in the financial market. So the main software is KeySense, but we also distribute additional tools, such a limited admin FileMaker server console. So 2 years ago, I made this solution developed and based on the server admin API. So I often make apps for myself. It's a good way to test new ideas. Last spring, I spent a few weeks in Japan. I traveled in various places from Tokyo to Sapporo, up and north. I had to manage a lot of transport by plane, by train, many different hotel reservations, various Japanese services. And I have to deal with a huge quantity of information, and I wanted to do everything with my iPhone. And only with my iPhone, with a dedicated app. And I think it was the easy way to do is to use FileMaker. We can build the app of our dream with FileMaker in few days. So I made it for myself. And last, our main solution, the application named KeySense, which is completely redesigned last summer. I will show further layout of this application later on my slide. I will present a before and after slide where you can see the evolution of this solution. So, my agenda today is to present the principle that I've been putting into practice for years. I will focus on composition. I will explain what it is, as well as three key elements I use every day for my graphic design: the use of font, the use of colors, and the use of icons. This is the 6 rules I try to apply every day. I work on alignment. I try to make my layout readable as possible. I try to follow a consistency into a layout and between all my layouts. I try to pay attention to details. I work on aesthetic, and I try to keep everything simple as possible. The first rule, maybe it's the easy one to follow. It's to be very careful to align your objects on the layout vertically and horizontally. The goal of alignment is not design, it's usability. It's make the thing easy to read. The purpose is to facilitate reading by making it fluid for the user. As a user, I want to read columns or rows. I don't want to have to read waves, right? To make your work easier, use the FileMaker guides or grid tool. There are many tools around, and there's no excuse to deliver something not really perfectly aligned. If you have more experience in UI design, you can use a grid system. I did some session on the past years. You can find this session on YouTube, the Clarice channel. Any one of you know what the grid system is? Yes. My topic today is not specifically the grid system, but you can go deep by some research on the internet. This is the kind of layout I'm working on a daily basis. The pink elements are only visible when you are in layout mode, in the developer mode. They are a representation of columns and margin, which facilitate the alignment of my object and all of my objects. Not only the fields and the level, but everything for me has to be aligned. if you put a web viewer, if you put a portal, if you put a graphic, I try to put things in columns, like a magazine, like a paper magazine. So all objects must be aligned, feeds, labels, and also buttons. Even portal rows, horizontally, I try to align everything. Here is another layout view of another solution. These are FileMaker guides, which are used to facilitate alignment. So we have these tools, we must use them. That makes your life easier. About FileMaker guides and grid, so this is the main three tools we can use to align stuff. You have to be careful because you couldn't use all of them at the same time. FileMaker gives you a kind of priority. For example, if you activate Snap to Guides and Dynamic Guides, is the Snap to Guide tool which will have the priority. So if you practice a kind of, if you think you have a kind of bug, if you complain about magnetism doesn't working, it's probably that you have two tools activated at the same time. So uncheck one of them, and you will fix everything, right? So this is my part with the first rule. My second rule is to make things readable. When you create a screen, it's like creating a page of a web page. The purpose is to make the thing easy to read. So FileMaker solution layout can be very complex with a bunch of information. We are doing complex software. So our work as a designer is to make things easier for the user. Easy to read, easy to understand, easy to interact with. Most of the time, as I said, we have to deal with a lot of information. We have fields, we have buttons, we have navigation, we have data to add in, we have data to read. So we're doing the stuff, but most of the time the user doesn't know our logic. So one time again, I use desktop publishing technique and paper layout techniques to make my FileMaker layouts easy to understand. The principle here is to create a visual hierarchy from the most important to the least important stuff. For example, if you are reading an article, you have the title, the subtitle, paragraphs. This structure allows you to break down the reading and to understand how everything works. You can do the same with FileMaker. You can play with sizes, we can play with shapes to give more importance to some parts. The second techniques I use is to group objects according to their meaning or to the content. For example, all navigation buttons are grouped in the same area in an horizontal or vertical navigation bar. Maybe you have heard about the Gestalt theory. This is something related to psychology. Gestalt means form in German. This theory says that the whole is different from its part. If we act on an individual elements, we modify the perception of the whole for our user. This is how the human brain works. Some example, I will not present all the rules, I will present only two rules. According to the law of proximity, the first rule I present, the closest elements will be perceived as belonging to the same group by a human brain. As soon as you group something, an average user see the whole object as a group. How we can use it as a FileMaker developer? In practice, you have to create group by meaning or content. If you take attention to not only FileMaker solution, but any solution around, you see that the kind of group with margin, with separation. So group of fields related to a person, for instance, like I put in a group my first name, my last name, the sex, the age. I do a separation, and after I create another group with everything related to address, like the street, the city, the zip code, the country. By function, I can group all the buttons related to navigation, and I separate with a kind of space, separate things. In FileMaker, there are several ways to create these kind of groups. You can use position of objects, you can use margins, you can use boxed areas or color areas. So a common mistake I saw a lot is the developer want to fill all the canvas, every room in the screen. I think it's a wrong way. Even on a desktop, we have a limited real estate. That's true, but it's wrong to try to fill every square inch. It's better to create several models or using a tab panel and put less information at a time. Use margin a lot, white spaces, and blank space to make your layout kind of breathe. Okay? So don't try to put everything and fill every space. Another law I present is the law of similarity. In the mind of a reader, the elements with graphic similarities have an identical meaning or similar functions. So how can we use this psychological function? So first, you must reinforce the similarity between the objects, for example, by using the same fonts, same color, same shape, same size, for all your buttons, for your caption, or your fields. All your fields must look the same, must look identical. In the same time, you must create truly distinct styles between different categories of objects. So I don't want to have an hesitation between a button and a field, or a label and a field. So for example, the style of the navigation button versus the style of other interaction button. I will show you real-time example of my layout after. So the goal is to facilitate learning and memorization and avoid confusion, right? Few words about composition. What is composition? So this is the process of arranging objects on a page or on a screen. So it consists of ordering things. So you have to use the principle I just presented to achieve this goal. So you have to create order, align your object, and group them in a smart way. You have to define yourself information and navigation areas. You can use margins, again, to arrange a group of objects. That is composition. This is one of my layouts. The color is only for the purpose of this session. The first work I do when I design an application, when I design a layout, is called the zoning. It's kind of cutting my canvas into areas, functional areas. I define where is my navigation, where and what are the dimensions of the body, the main part of my form. I have the same kind of reflection for list, but much more work with the form. I can create contextual information area depending on my needs. So the structure must be the same or at least consistent between the other pages. Okay? So I do the work one and I use it all over my layouts. So once again, FileMaker gives you all the tools you need to create this structure. You can use colors or simple shapes like square to create area or line or background to arrange your object in. Of course, the composition is related to your device, the size of your devices. you will not have the same pattern on an iPhone or on the desktop. So this is another example of one small solution on iPhone. A single column pattern in this case is probably better on the iPhone. On the opposite, with a desktop or even an iPad, you can handle a more complex pattern with several columns of content. It's really up to you. The next question you have to ask is the size of the object of the text. I will come on this subject later on. As long as you choose your own pattern, you have to keep it all along your layout. It's the consistency of your UI. So for me, this other principle is also easy to apply. All similar objects must look the same into your layout. That means all your fields must look the same, except if you want a specific title, but let's say all the edit fields or all the reading fields or all the reading labels must look the same. And also between your different layouts. If you have a buttons, quit buttons, this button must be the same one on all your layouts, must be at the same position, must have the same color, the same behavior, everything must be consistent, right? When you design a solution with several layouts, my advice is at the end of your development to do a full review to check if all your objects look the same size and the same position. So once again, FileMaker gives you some help. You can use themes and styles to do that. So the styles help you to respect consistency. You give an object a specific size, type, all along the layout. You use the same style, and everything must be correct except the position, because position is not related to theme or style. My advice is to create as soon as possible, since your first layout, create your own custom theme, and to create style all along you are using new object. Easier to do this way than wait the end of your development to create all these styles. Everyone here know what the theme and style are? Use them? Okay. Some example about consistency. These are different layouts from an old solution I made for a swim suite company in France. So various screens, but the nav bar is the same, the buttons look the same, with the same position, the same shape. Okay. Sorry to be quick, but I have kind of hundreds of slides. And maybe one of you have a plane later on, I don't know. So my fourth rule is to pay attention to details. The thing I'm doing now, working in a new company with other developers, I used to be a custom developer working alone, so I don't have all of these rules. But when you are working with others, you have to prepare stuff, and every developer must use the design the same, right? So the easiest thing to do is to create a UI kit. So you create your own rule, and you write this rule into a UI kit. This is good if you have several developers, or if you want to release several solutions with the same look. This is kind of design catalog of your solution. So our main application, which I redesigned last summer, is a huge list with nearly 500 user layouts. We have kind of 3,000 layouts. But most of them are for development purpose. Only 500 are accessible for the user. So it's a huge work. a UI kit at this time was necessary to collect and track all design attributes and all the changes we make. So the process of changing everything took 6 months. So I created this UI kit in FileMaker as soon as the design was validated by the development team. It's a layout only accessible to the internal team. It brings together all our guidelines and all the objects we need in different panels. So this is French, but we have dimensions, we have icons, buttons, the logo we use, we have fonts, we have text, colors. So we put everything, every object, and as soon as you need an object, you can go in this layout and pick the object you need. The fifth part, this one will be a little bit longer because I will talk about icons, color, and text. So this part is aesthetic. Not the first one for me because I'm more into usability, but I also a little bit in aesthetic. So it's not the first one, but is it important when you want something nice and appealing? If you want to create something nice, you don't need to be a designer, believe me. Because most of the time, you don't need to really creating something, to create anything. You can use existing objects like icon libraries. You don't have to create font too. You just have to choose a nice one. Don't hesitate to look around and take inspiration from what already exists. So during the opening keynote, you heard the sentence from Picasso or Steve Jobs, I don't know, bad artist, steal. So you can steal and use it. You know the difference between, in the mind of Steve Jobs, between stealing and copying? I don't know the word in English. To copy and to steal. What is better to steal than to copy? When you steal, you think about your need and you take what you need. When you copy, you really don't understand. And I saw people copying one part and another part from another project, and they mixed the two things. So when you copy, you create a kind of Frankenstein line. When you steal, you understand what you are doing. This is the meaning of the sentence. So I start with fonts. Fonts play a really big role in the style of the solution. Fonts are giving the character of your solution. They must be chosen very carefully, even if the choice seems limited on our platform. The first thing is to avoid the common mistake of multiplying the fonts. Try to use only one family, 2 max per solution. Always remember that the objective for you is make the thing simple to read and to understand easily. You don't need to multiply the fonts. A single font family doesn't prevent you from playing with size and style. You can give variation, you can give aesthetic even with one font. So you have to choose a font with a large variation. So most of the fonts you can have only regular, bold, or italic. But there are some families where you can have 10 or 12 different variations between ultra thin to ultra bold, right? So you take a family and all the variation, and you can create this kind of hierarchy. You can have a label or a title in the different shape and with the same family at the same time. So I use the Segway font the last year because I can have it on Mac, I can use it on PC, it's a Microsoft font, and most of our customers are on PC, so Segway is a really nice font. This is some example from my old work. So visual hierarchy is mainly created with font size and font weight, as in HTML with H1, H2, H3 attributes. If you want a specific content to pop up, make significant differences in size, I wanted to emphasize on the numbers, so I make them very big, not only 2 points more. Make the thing really different. You don't make a real difference by increases only by a couple of points. Go for it. Maybe you heard the word serif and sans serif. I think it's the same word in English than in French. So a quick slide to explain the differences between serif and sans serif font and why it's important to know the difference. These names means categories of fonts according to their shape. So the first three, Arial, Helvetica Neue, and Segway, have a kind of straight design, more modern. These are sans serif fonts. The last two, with varying thickness along the shape, are called serif. Next multiplication. So the most visible difference is the consistency of the thickness of the left font versus the variation of the thickness on the right. And you have to know that for desktop, for reading on desktop, sans serif fonts are way better. So every little font you have on your watch, on your iPhone, is always sans serif font because it's way better for the eye and for the reading. The serif font, the one on the right, the green one, is better for paper. So if you want to edit something, you can use the serif font. Try to choose the sans serif for your screen. So, another point, if your solution is to be used on both Windows and Mac, or if you don't know at all your user device, be careful. Text is not represented the same way, even the same name of the font with the same size. This is something I did on my Mac. So I created this layout on my Mac with fonts that exist on both platforms. The red guides were created on my Mac layout, and no words at this time overlapped the text. When the same layout was used on my Windows machine, so we see clear differences. So there may be differences in length or line spacing. The red circles focus on the problems. So if you want to use these fonts cross-platform, the solution is to provide a larger space. So it could be a field, it could be a merge field, be a text. So you have to take care of this if your solution will be used cross-platform. Probably every one of us have experienced bad thing with cross-platform solution. A quick slide, a quick reminder about the sizes recommended by the guidelines for each OS. If you don't know, each system OS is freely accessible to the internet. So you have all the information you want, all the rules about the standard for macOS, Windows, iOS. So the standard size on desktop for the field, the basic text is 11 or 12 points. On iOS, it's a little bit bigger. The advice is to use a font between 14 to 18 points. I think that anything much bigger gives a less professional look and feel to a software, so try to keep the thing small as soon as everything is readable. About the usage of lowercase and uppercase, so I have some questions from time to time. So try to limit the usage of capital letters. It's good for buttons, but not for big and long text. So I use the uppercase only for buttons and labels. Some slides about icons now. So as I said, since 1984, icons are a key element of any GUI. It's way better to use them instead of long sentences. Our users are now familiar with this kind of grammar. A few years ago, it was only white-collar workers who used the computer, but for a decade now, because of the smartphones everywhere, every single one is familiar with this kind of icon. So we have to use them. You have to use icons for simple and standard actions, like new or delete records, previews or next page, exit, quit. So standard icons already exist for these functions. Our users already know the meaning of most of them. So don't try to innovate too much in this area. If an icon exists for a specific action, do not try to recreate the wheel. The user will immediately understand the meaning if he is familiar with the icon. So a little reminder here of Suzanne Pierre's work, the great artist who designed the icons used in the very first Macintosh Finder in 1984. I didn't know when I created the slide, I didn't know we were in an Apple. I don't do that only because I'm in an Apple campus, I swear. So concepts are evolved over the years, but the common action has the same metaphor for all users. So in 40 years, still a garbage, a trash can, to the delete action. And everyone understands that. And the younger one doesn't know what this thing is. But we still, I think some software use this to say, right? Consistency must also exist with the usage of icons. You must never mix different families. And I see this mistake a lot. You have a nice solution, you have a lot of icons, and you need a new function, you need a new layout. And you don't want to spend time trying to find the perfect icons. And you take the first one you find, and that breaks everything, because you lose consistency, you break consistency, and you have something that didn't match, that doesn't match with the rest of your library. So you must never mix different families. It's easy now to buy one big library with all the choice you need, and it's very cheap. So use the internet and you find maybe 7,000 different icons in the same library. So that helps you to illustrate what you want to use. So I encourage you, if you have a big solution, to buy a library, and it's quicker to work this way. Use a proper size for an icon. So in this area too, size matters. The look and feel of the device running your solution, the device running on your solution impact the average sizes. For example, for a navigation bar, I recommend between 16 and 20 points an icon on the desktop. It has to be bigger on iOS, like 20 to 24 points for the icons, into a button a little bit bigger. The button, the shape of the button, the gray area, must be between 40 and 50 points on the iOS or iPad screen. So, like fonts, icons that are too big give a childish look and feel of your solution. So there's a very subtle usage of icons and fonts. Take care of not using them in a too big size. Do you understand my bad English? So try to keep the thing small, because that gives you the look of your solution a more professional look and feel. So at the top of this screenshot, it was the interface of our Keysense software before the redesign last year. So this on top, before, on the bottom, after I redesigned the navigation, I removed the top nav bar to put everything in an hidden sidebar. In real life, it's a card. We get an icon library. We bought an icon library to have a more consistent overall look. We are using more than 200 different icons in this application. We used to have 3 or 4 different family of fonts. We replaced everything by the Microsoft Segway fonts. I redesigned some area. I add margin and blank space, and I add color to make everything, try to make things more attractive. And I get rid of every single lines. I hate lines. I think it's too much old school for me. So this is the list view of, we have many lists in the software. And color. As I said earlier, I use a lot of colors in my solution. I think color is a good way to memorize stuff. To have a specific module, I give color to specific modules, so it's much more easy to learn and to memorize things. But color, it's a very sensitive subject. You shouldn't overdo it, otherwise you break all your design work. Color is nice, but can turn ugly really quick. So if you're not confident in that domain, keep it simple. Even a black and white UI can be classy in 2024. So it's not mandatory. If you're comfortable with it, try to use colors. Most of the time, I use color in large areas, mainly to create a group of content. It's really easy to create a group. The nav bar, for instance, with colors. Once again, in our new interface, each module has its own color. So buttons have their own color grammar too. The navigation objects are in orange. The other interaction buttons use a kind of blue-gray color palette. So I wanted to make a separation between what is navigation and what are the other kind of interaction buttons. I also use color and opacity to mark rows and columns in lists and portals instead of the previous lines. Color and aesthetic. So color reinforces the personality of your application. It makes everything sexier. Color could be cultural, the same color in different countries. I think we have Japanese friend in the room. The kawaii color. So in Japan, there's something very light, very pastel. In our country, it will be unprofessional to have this kind of color. You can have governmental website or governmental app in pink or blue or light blue, very common in Japan. So color is cultural. So really hard to figure it out. So as soon as you work with that, it's interesting. Color is related to business too, sometimes. In some business, like this is aviation example, airport example. So in some business, the same color always come back. In the medical world, you see a lot of blue and green for the medical apps. If you have a solution in this kind of business, you may have an interest in using the same graphic codes, the same colors. So if you do your research prior to the design, you can find some codes. So try to use this code. This will improve the impact and give a more professional look to your solution. Every time I have a new solution, I try to do my research and try to find what is around in the same universe of my customer. color and ergonomics. So pay attention to the use of colors that are too bright or on the opposite too light. Always think about contrast. As always, things must be readable. So if you have text above color, it's really sensitive. You have to take care of the contrast. Please note that good use of a light color can rest the reader. On the contrary, a large area of bright color can be tiring. Once again, FileMaker gives you the tool to deal with color. You have everything you need to create your own palette. So FileMaker can automatically decline secondary colors from the primary you choose. It creates automatically one darker and one lighter. So this is very useful to design rapidly the different status of a button, for example. You have a normal button, you have the over button, you have the active button. You can play with this color lighter or darker. Try something really quick. So once again, if you choose a palette, try to keep everything on the page in a kit. This is the UI kit of our solution. These are all the color and the references we use. We keep track of the color in an hexadecimal way because we use a lot of web viewer and we don't use the RGB terminology, but the web terminology. And the last rule, I heard this in many sessions at this DEF CON, not only for design, but in all other domains. Keep it simple. It's always better, especially with FileMaker. A beginner tends to add too many elements and too many variations at a time, when the exact opposite should be done. When you put too much on the screen, you have what psychologists call a mental load, and you provoke some stress to the user and to the reader. So try to make everything simple. So for me, the symbol of simplicity in graphic design is the flat design, the one I use every day. So flat design removes everything that is not useful. For example, if I want to use a color rectangle, I don't need a gradient or I don't need shadow. I just want a solid color. Okay? This is my favorite quote in design and my last slide. I apply this principle during all of my development, trying to make my solutions more usable anytime I can. And I ask myself every time, is it possible to make the navigation easier or more intuitive? Is a user can understand these complex forms at the first sight? Is it logical? These are the kind of questions a UI designer asks to himself every time, and not the one. Most of the time, the answer is keep it simple. So this was the last one. You can have your play. Thank you at start. Any question?
How do you account for people who are colorblind? I have a few users that are that.
Frankly, I never had this case. I had the same question a few years ago at one of my DEF CON sessions, and I'm a developer since 1980 with FileMaker 3.1. I have many different solutions and many different customers. I never had this. I did custom development, so I knew my user. In the new company since years now, I don't know the user because we don't work on that.
I'm an in-house developer, and they come to me and tell me these are the colors that look alike, and so I try to avoid those two colors.
The thing I'm not sure there's a solution, but as soon as you change the color for one person
It's that I see
all
color
the,
a little differently than other people do.
He's
It's not
explained,
black and white.
yeah, he's explained it. And so it's kind of a,
the only thing you can do if you want to address the problems, you can have a kind of conditional formatting, the setup, the preference for, and you can change the color according to the user. You could do that with FileMaker. So it's a little bit of work, but let's say
I haven't tried.
by default you have the text in black, and for a particular user on the preference, on the setting, you can change everything. Yes.
How do you handle users that are all over the road with different screen resolutions? You have people with huge monitors, laptops, and I always get people like, it's too big, too small, they zoom in, they zoom out, and how do you really handle?
Yes, this is huge because FileMaker is not responsive. So for the solution I redesigned, we have kind of 100 users. We collect all the sizes, all the different desktop sizes, and we make a choice. So we took the average. Some users have bigger screen, some of them have smaller. The most part fits what we did. So I'm not a great fan of the way you can expand something because as soon as you have several columns, it doesn't work well because you can only expand one column and the other doesn't. So the solution, this one, where's my curve? So my solution, so this one, so when you open the screen, so the first one, before I came, everything go big and the content was in the center of the screen and it was awful. So I changed everything. The screen is anchored on the left. The background expand. So if most of the users are on PC, so on PC, they open every window full screen. We don't do that on Macintosh. And so they can expand it full screen. They have a background that is consistent, but the column didn't expand so much. So there's no real solution.
There's no easy answer.
Yeah, it's not responsive. So yes.
So for colors, you don't use any shading or anything like that. You just use a solid color.
Yes, solid, or I play with opacity.
Okay.
This, for example, this is one color, and with an opacity, I think it's 20% of white or black. I don't use gradients.
Do you color your layout parts?
Sometimes, yes. This one is colored because I have nothing there. This is a list, so I need to dedicate. Depending on the solution, we are free to do what we want. FileMaker allows us to change the color background of any part if I want. I think my header, I have a specific style for my header, for my footer, for my body.
And also on the buttons, you can have the solid color inside, and then you can have a color around the outside border. Do you make that the same, or
No,
do you not color the outside?
So for the button, it's kind of difficult because the button, I want to manage the color as a regular button, but also when I use conditional formatting. And with conditional formatting, you have no access to borders. You have access to the
inside.
Yeah, to the background. So I never use borders.
So you just turn them off?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I noticed that on some of your solutions, as opposed to this one that you're showing right here, when you have a list view, that you have to do the alternating color for the rows.
Yes.
But all of the columns they're all the same. But then on this one, you alternate the color of the columns as well. Is there like a
yes,
principle
depending
on that?
depending of the, maybe I show you something old. In the old time, I was lazy. The thing is, you know what is it when you're in design? Sometimes you like a new thing you are doing, and for a few years you're using the same techniques and you like it, you love it, you put it everywhere. So now I like the column this way. On this one, I have habits, so my habits now is to use this technique to display the column. And this is pretty difficult because in this solution, some of our lists are FileMaker lists, but half of them are JavaScript list tabulator, kind of data grid or data tables.
Right.
So I have to, because with data tables and tabulators, the user can add new columns or delete, or you can choose what you want to see. And I have to make a calculation in HTML and CSS to have the same alternate column color.
It's not hard coded to a column.
No, and he can move the column, and if he moves the column, I have to rearrange the color. So it was a pain, but it's nice. So the purpose is to make something nice, right? Yes?
I might have misunderstood, but did you say that when you add a color to your custom palette, it can automatically put a darker and a lighter color?
When you drag okay, on the FileMaker color palette, on top, when you drag a color, automatically FileMaker put the color you choose in the middle. And as soon as you have the color in the middle, it creates automatically a darker shade and a lighter one. You never use that? You choose a color, you click on the top. Maybe I try a live demo. No one has a plane now. I'm leaving tomorrow. I have time.
Go for it.
No, I can't. Try to color.
So you have the color here.
It's in screen.
Oh. It will be difficult for me now. I try to copy I have to copy because I cannot work like this. I don't know where is my.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I can work there. So you click there. So you have 4 inspectors. You choose the third one. You have the color here, or if you use text or button, you have another palette here, the same one. Okay. So as soon as you click here, so you select the color, you change and see anything. When you drag a color, it creates 3 of the color palette on this one. Are you on Mac or Windows? You're on Mac. So it's easier on Mac. So as soon as I drag something, or if I create not a color, let's say, so if you have okay, I drag my color and automatically give me 3 variations of my color.
I often use that, and it doesn't
Yeah, I
behave
don't
that
know.
way.
because it keeps tracks of my setting on this computer. I don't have the same setting, but on my other computer, I have the wheel of color. So depending on what setting you are. Any more questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
You use the sans serif for the font, for the user interface. You have a solution that prints out a lot of documents, and you use another interface with the serif.
Depending of the customer of the rules, because most of the time everything in print, you have to respect chart kind of with the specific logo or specific fonts. So
That would be a case where you would use two fonts or one
yeah,
solution.
yeah.
One for the interface
Yes,
and
one
then
for
one
the
for
interface.
printing.
After for the paper, you can choose another.
Okay.
It's about the layout design.
Yeah,
You're
no, I
free.
understand.
If you have a sensory font for the screen, you're free to use Times or any other
On the
font,
printed ones.
of course. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
On icons and buttons, do you like to change the color for when the mouse hovers over it, or do you like?
Yes, most time as possible, because the much feedback you give to the user is better for him. He can understand, and also because sometimes you can use icons not for buttons but just for illustration. So they can see the difference between what is an interactive button and what is a simple illustration. So the other thing is really important, and also the hand, the way the cursor change to the hand. Any more questions? So thank you again. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Merci.